Hi, G&Me here, and today's video we're going to talk about preparing dehydrated meals. So I'm going to walk you through two meals. The first one here is going to be just a family recipe of spaghetti. So I'm going to be using elbow macaroni because it works better than spaghetti noodles. I've got some Hunt's garlic and herb sauce, Parmesan cheese, and then just some 93% lean ground beef, 1 pound. So we'll be doing that one, and then I'm going to do another recipe, and this is going to be a cold soak chicken pasta salad. We're going to have some cucumbers, some shells, some ranch dressing. I'm going to go with canned chicken for this one, and then tomatoes and onions. So the first thing I'm going to do is, when I create a recipe to dehydrate, is I input all of this information into a calorie counting app. So I use the app called Lose It, and we'll link that in the comments below. And then that way I can determine how many servings my recipe is going to make. I shoot for about 500 to 550 calories per serving. And so I will talk through that and show you what that looks like here in a little bit. But first, we're going to start our pasta. So come on over here with me. All right, here we go. And we'll start the timer. Let me give it a stir. Get those elbows going. And now we'll add some shells. And set the timer. All right, so while the pasta is cooking, I wanted to show you my dehydrator. Now, I should have prefaced at the beginning of the video, I am 100% new to dehydrating for this adventure on the Appalachian Trail. So I've learned a lot. I'm not an expert. I'm just gonna talk you through kind of my experience. So honestly, I didn't do a lot of research on dehydrators, did a little bit. Right, so the research that I did do, I decided that I wanted a more cabinet style where the fan is in the back rather than the round ones that are also available. Looked for a good price point, and I went with this Magic Mill dehydrator. So let's open it up, and you'll see I've got some things in here. It comes with 7 trays or racks. So I can dry 7 racks at a time. On this rack, I have some parchment paper that I have cut or torn to fit my racks. And this is what I put my food on. And I reuse these over and over until they're pretty bad. And then it does come with a few other trays. So it comes with these mesh trays for small, like fruits and vegetables, and then a full tray for liquids. But again, I tend to use just the parchment paper. They're disposable. These got stained when I did some tomato-based sauce on those. So I typically don't use these and just set these aside. So we'll get to then more on how it's used here in a moment once our pasta is ready. Okay. All right, so my little shells are ready to go, and I'm going to start getting them into the dehydrator. So I'm going to take one of my racks, slide it underneath my parchment paper. I've chilled these off with some cool water after I drained them, and then I'm just going to spread them out on my parchment paper here. All right, so we're down to our last tray, some macaroni elbows. Here. Get them spread out. And we're going to pop them in to the dehydrator. Okay, those are done. All right, now I'm just gonna go ahead and push start here, and that's gonna do the pre-programmed 10-hour, 167 degrees Fahrenheit. And that seems to be working well for me. It is now 9:23, so we should finish up around 7:30 this evening in time for us to pull those out and start a new load for overnight. So we'll see you in a bit. Okay, so while our pasta is in the dehydrator, I'm gonna go ahead and start cooking my ground beef. This is a pound of ground beef that I'm gonna brown here. Now, one of the things when you're dehydrating, you want to minimize the amount of fat as much as possible. Higher fatted foods are more likely to go rancid, and so that's why I'm using the 93% lean. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some breadcrumbs to my ground beef. And I prefer, instead of doing the quarter cup measure, I'm gonna do the weight. So I'm gonna go ahead and use my scale over here and measure out 28 grams of breadcrumbs to add to my meat. And the reason why I'm doing this is sometimes when you dehydrate meat, the rehydration doesn't go great. So by adding these breadcrumbs, it helps to kind of absorb some of the moisture in the rehydration process and makes it less chewy, more like it is before dehydration. Now I add a quarter of a cup of breadcrumbs for every pound. Some people will do more than that. To me, it seems like a quarter cup is plenty. I've heard even up to a whole cup for a pound, but you can kind of experiment with that. So I'm also going to add some seasoning, some salt and pepper, as I brown my meat, and a little bit of Italian seasoning too. Whoop. Get that cooked in. All right, so we're gonna take our pasta out. It's done dehydrating. First thing we need to do is get our scale ready. So I'm gonna zero out the scale with our container, and I'm gonna start pulling out our pasta. So here are our shells after they have dehydrated. And what I need to do is I need to weigh our shells to figure out how many grams will go into each serving. And we'll talk more about that later. But the important thing is that I weigh the shells now. As I take them off the tray, I just kind of break them up. They kind of tend to stick together, but they have definitely been dehydrated. So we'll take care of that. All right, so we have 439 grams of shells and 414 grams of macaroni. All right, next up, we're going to get the ground beef dehydrated. This is 1 pound of 93% lean ground beef. I've let it chill in the refrigerator. So now I'm going to go ahead and spread it out on my parchment paper. Again, spreading it kind of thin, breaking up any clumps, and getting it ready for dehydration. Meats I tend to dehydrate a little bit longer, about 12 hours instead of 10 hours. I like to do them overnight. Here we go. right, so I'm just going to go ahead and drain off the liquid of my canned chicken and then rinse it off a little bit. Get rid of some of the excess fat before I dehydrate it. All right, now that I have my chicken kind of broken up into smaller pieces, I am ready to put it on the parchment paper to dehydrate it. So, just like with the ground beef, just spread it out. Sometimes I will buy raw chicken breasts and use my Instapot and cook my chicken breast in the Instapot, and then use, you could either use an electric mixer of some sort and shred it, or use your fork and shred it. But this time I decided to go with canned chicken. All right, so we'll go ahead and put that in. And now we have our hamburger and our chicken in. We'll push start. I'm gonna go ahead and go for 12.5 hours. So tomorrow morning that will be done, and we'll do our sauce, our spaghetti sauce, and our vegetables. So good night. All right, so we are going to kind of cook down our sauce just to thicken it up a little bit. So put it on the stove, let it cook, and then we'll start the dehydration. All right, so time to chop some veggies. Alrighty, so our chicken and ground beef is done. Pull that out, and that is a can of chicken. Let me go ahead and zero my scale to get the weight for this. Before I put it in, I'm going to break it up a little bit. Get some of the bigger clumps separated. Make sure it's nice and dry. You definitely want your meat to be dry. All right, looks good. One tray. Got 3 trays of chicken. I mentioned earlier that sometimes I'll buy chicken breasts and use my Instapot to cook them, and then shred them with a mixer, and that's worked really well. But when in a pinch, you can certainly do canned chicken quickly. All right, so that came out nice. I got all 3 cans. Okay, I lost a little bit there. And that comes in at 177 grams for my chicken. All right, moving on. That's zeroed. And here's our ground beef. So this is approximately 1/2 pound of ground beef here. I think it looks like grape nuts. It's Toby, you can get those. second sheet. And just kind of breaking up the bigger clumps, making sure that it's dry all the way through on those. This tends to feel a little bit greasier. And our 1 pound of ground beef is 156 grams now that it's dehydrated.
Wow.
Okay, setting those all aside, and we don't need that anymore. We're gonna start our next round of dehydration. So let's get our veggies.
Pausing.
All right, so our veggies are done, so we'll go ahead and pull them out. Our first sheet is our tomato sauce. It'll come off, and this is almost like a fruit leather. All right, so moving on to our other vegetables. Here we have our onions. These will go much quicker.